On the evening of 13th November 2007, at Jackson State University in Mississippi, a 20-year-old student, Latasha Norman, was picked up by her jealous, abusive, and controlling ex-boyfriend, a 24-year-old Stanley Dwayne Cole. Stanley was furious that Latasha had refused to get back with him, so he drove her to a nearby restaurant parking lot. While they were inside the car, Stanley punched heavy blows on her face. He then stabbed her. When he realized that she was dead, he placed her body inside the trunk of his car. He then drove the body to a wooded area in a remote area of North Jackson, where he dumped it and covered it with cardboards before fleeing the scene. Stanley Cole was so wicked to have murdered his ex-girlfriend, Latasha Norman, a university student. This is the story of Latasha Norman. Latasha Norman was born on 21st April 1987 in Greenville, Mississippi. She was raised by her mother, Patricia Bolden, and her stepfather, Danny Bolden. She grew up in a large, close-knit family in a small town of Greenville. She went to Greenville Weston High School. While still in high school, Latasha was a very bright student. She also worked at a local grocery store near their house to get a little money for her accommodation. Sometimes later, she met a 24-year-old man, Stanely Dwayne Cole. Stanley had already graduated from high school but had not yet joined a university. The two became good friends, and later on they started dating. In the year 2005, Latasha graduated from high school with good grades. She then joined Jackson State University in the fall of the year 2005. While at the university, she majored in accounting. Latasha also loved journalism, so she joined a newspaper crew at the university. Sometimes later, Latasha encouraged her boyfriend, Stanley, to also join her in university. Stanley agreed, and Latasha helped him to get accepted at the university. Stanley joined Jackson State University, the same university Latasha was studying at, and he majored in criminal justice. While at university, the two continued dating. However, Stanley was not ambitious about his life as Latasha, so he didn't take his studies seriously. He would skip classes and spend most of his time playing video games. Latasha was not happy with the way Stanley was ruining his life. Sometimes later, Stanley and his friends took their girlfriends on a double date in a restaurant. While the four of them were in the car, Latasha's phone kept ringing and she wasn't answering it, so Stanley got annoyed and told her to pick up the call. However, Latasha was not in a good mood, so she told him to mind his own business. Stanley got angry and slapped the phone from her hand. Latasha bent down to collect her phone, but Stanley also bent down to prevent her from collecting it. When Latasha was coming up after picking her phone, she accidentally hit Stanley in the face and he started bleeding. Latasha apologized to him for hitting him accidentally, but Stanley was so angry and he didn't want to hear any word from her, so he also slapped her across the face. The two started fighting, and their friends from the back seats tried to calm them down. When they couldn't calm them down, they called the police, who arrived at the scene and intervened. Later on, after the dispute, Latasha went to the police station and filed assault charges against Stanley, but he was never arrested at that time. Stanley started cheating on Latasha with another lady. The two engaged in a sexual relationship, and soon the lady became pregnant for Stanley. When Latasha found out about the affair, she was very much angry. She couldn't take in the betrayal, so in the year 2007, she ended her relationship with Stanley. Latasha met a young man named Marquise. In the early November of 2007, Marquise was a college graduate, and he was a little older than Latasha. He was also a working man. The two began dating. Later on, Latasha took him to Greenville so that he could meet her family. When they went there, they spent some time with her family. Marquise and Latasha even went to town to watch Latasha's brother play in a basketball tournament. After the game was over, they headed back to Latasha's parents' house. However, when they were spending their time there, Marquise felt that he needed to go back home, so he told Latasha that they should start going. One of Latasha's cousins saw as if Marquise was forcing Latasha to forcefully go with him, so the two started a verbal altercation. Latasha intervened and stopped the fight. She then gave her family a goodbye kiss and she left with Marquise. They went back to campus. Stanley found that Latasha had moved on and she was currently in a love relationship with her new boyfriend Marquise. This made him to feel jealous, so he started getting back at Latasha. He slashed her car tires and stole her tag from the car. As if that was not enough, he broke into her car and stole her driving license. Then, out of bitterness and jealousy, he scratched her car. A few days later, on the evening of 13th November 2007, Stanley called Latasha so that they can meet up. When Latasha agreed, Stanley went and picked her up, and he drove her a nearby restaurant parking lot. While they were in Stanley's car talking, Stanley told her that they should get back together. Latasha told him that she had already moved on with her life, and she has a new boyfriend, Marquise. Therefore, she can't move backwards again. She told Stanley to stay with his pregnant girlfriend and make a family with her. This discussion led into an argument, and Latasha became aggressive and hit him. He hit Latasha back with a backhanded fist, striking her in the nose too hard. He continued hitting her so hard, he then stabbed her. When he realized that Latasha was dead, he panicked. So he placed her body inside the trunk of his girlfriend's car that he was driving. He then continued with his daily routine as usual. He picked up his girlfriend and other friends, and they went to the restaurant where they had a meeting. After the meeting, he drove her girlfriend home. He then told her that he had to take out the trash. So he got her girlfriend's car key and drove away with Latasha's body inside the trunk of the car. Apparently, nobody knew that Stanley kept Latasha's dead body inside the trunk of the car. So Stanley drove to a wooded area where he dumped Latasha's body and covered it with cardboards. Meanwhile, Latasha's mother had been unable to get in contact with her. She would normally talk to Latasha after she finished her classes, but on that day, Latasha didn't call her. And when she tried to call her, she didn't answer her phone. Marquise was also trying to contact Latasha, but he couldn't reach her. The following day, he went to her school to check on her. At school, nobody had heard from Latasha or seen her. Marquise learned that Latasha left her class on the evening of 13th, but she didn't make it to her dormitory, and she had not driven anywhere since her car was still parked at the university parking lot. Marquise knew that something was wrong, so he went to the campus police to file a missing persons report. After filing the report, the police immediately began searching for Latasha around the campus. They searched everywhere, but they didn't find her. The police also spoke with her fellow students, but none of them had seen or heard anything suspicious. They questioned Brittany, who was Latasha's close friend. However, she told the police that she last saw Latasha walking to the class on the morning of 13th October, and she never again saw her throughout the day. So the police checked the campus security cameras to trace Latasha's movements. However, they didn't see any sign of her in the footage. The campus police reached out to the Jackson Police Department to handle the case because they had more resources. The Jackson Police Department interviewed people who were close to Latasha so that they can get a lead where Latasha could be. They called her parents, and they asked them if they had seen their daughter, Latasha, because she was missing. Latasha's parents said that they had not seen her. They told the investigators that Latasha was very paranoid and was uneasy. A couple of days ago, she had told them that someone had been targeting her, and so she felt scared. Latasha also told them that the person had stole her driver's license, slashed her car tires, and keyed her car. Her parents told the police that they suspect her new boyfriend, Marquise. The police reached out to the FBI, who had better resources to help them with the case. The police and the FBI knew they had to question her boyfriend, Marquise, but first they analyzed Latasha's cell phone records so that they can trace her last movements. The cell phone data showed that Latasha was at Marquise's apartment, which was a few miles from her campus. The data also showed that Latasha's phone was traveling from his place back towards Jackson State University. But before it got back to campus, the phone was shut off. So the investigators started to suspect her boyfriend, Marquise, could have been involved in her disappearance. The investigators wanted to speak with Marquise, so they brought him in for questioning. Upon being questioned about Latasha's disappearance, Marquise told the investigators that Latasha had spent the night at his apartment before she went missing. The investigators analyzed Marquise's cell phone records, and they found out that it was indeed true that Latasha had spent the night at his apartment before she disappeared, and so they were not sure if he was involved in her disappearance. Marquise also told the investigators that Latasha had an ex-boyfriend known as Stanley, and so they should speak to him. The investigators started investigating Stanley. They learned that he was Latasha's ex-boyfriend, but he was in a new relationship and his new girlfriend, who was pregnant. Detectives looked into the students' records. They found out that the same day Latasha disappeared, Stanley sent documents to the registration's office that he will be withdrawing from school. As the investigations continued, the investigators learned that Stanley and Latasha had a violent relationship and Stanley would physically assault her. They learned that Stanley would hit Latasha badly, and this made her to file a report at the police station. So the investigators knew that they had to find Stanley and bring him in for questioning. On the 22nd November 2007, 9 days after Latasha was reported missing, detectives received a call from a local car dealer. The dealer told them about a '98 Dodge Neon car which had been sold to him. He told them that the car looked very suspicious because the carpet inside its trunk had been removed. The detectives went to the car dealer workplace to investigate the car. They took the car's information, including the vehicle identification number. They ran the information in the system, and they found out that the car belonged to Stanley's girlfriend. The detectives obtained a search warrant for the vehicle. They swapped the vehicle and found a significant amount of blood in the trunk. They took the blood to the crime lab to compare the DNA they found in the trunk with Latasha's DNA. On November 28, 2007, the results were out and the DNA matched. They discovered that Latasha had been in the trunk of that car, so the detectives started looking for Stanley's girlfriend. They found her, and they brought her in for questioning about Latasha's disappearance. She said she didn't know Latasha, and they have never met, so she didn't have anything to do with her disappearance. She added that on the night of 13th, she and Stanley were at home. Then later on, Stanley told her that he was going to take the trash out, so he left, but he never came back until 40 minutes later. The detectives asked her about the blood that was found in her car, but she told them to talk to Stanley because he was the one who always used her car all the time. When the detectives spoke with Stanley, he said that he hadn't seen Latasha. The detectives continued to investigate him. They searched Stanley's phone, and they discovered that on the day Latasha was last seen, Stanley's phone pinged at Jackson State University, and then it traveled to a wooded area several miles away. On November 29, 2007, Stanley was summoned at Pearl County Municipal Court. He was facing charges for domestic violence, which had been filed by Latasha back in October. But the detectives were not yet done with him because they knew he was the prime suspect. So they went for him at the court where he was facing domestic violence charges against Latasha. Once in police custody, the detectives were hard on him, and they used every means to force him to confess about Latasha's disappearance. Stanley confessed to killing his ex-girlfriend, Latasha Norman, on the evening of 13th November 2007. He told them about how hard he hit her on the face and stabbed her. When he realized that she was dead, he put her dead body inside the trunk of his current girlfriend's car and drove the body to a wooded area in remote area of North Jackson, where he dumped it and covered it with cardboards. He took detectives to the place where he discarded the body of Latasha. When the detectives found the body of Latasha Norman, it was badly decomposed, and so they had to use dental records to positively identify her. The body was taken for an autopsy. When the results were out, it was determined that a nick was found on her rib cage. The examiner also determined that a portion of her rib was missing, and so she was most likely to have been stabbed to death. They sent Latasha's bones for forensic testing, and they were able to confirm that she had been stabbed to death. Stanley Cole was arrested and charged with first-degree murder of Latasha Norman. On the 17th February 2010, Stanley Cole stood trial for Latasha's murder. He maintained that Latasha's death was an accident. The jury, however, did not believe him, and so on the 22nd February, Stanley was found guilty, and he got life in prison. In the year 2012, the Mississippi Supreme Court overturned the conviction. Stanley's attorneys had argued that a lesser charge should have been considered. They said that Stanley didn't get a fair trial because of extensive media coverage. So the Supreme Court granted Stanley a new trial, which was to begin in the year 2014. However, the prosecutors offered Stanley a plea deal of 40 years without parole. Stanley agreed to the plea deal, and he was sentenced to 40 years without parole at Mississippi prison.